The story of Prichard High School had its beginnings in the year 1918 through the generosity of Dr. Lewis Prichard. Dr. Prichard proposed to pay half the cost for a new high school in Grayson. The school board and some progressive Grayson citizens acted quickly on his proposal, and on May 16, 1918, construction plans were in place and a site had been selected for the new high school. The high school was named Prichard High School in honor of Dr. Lewis Prichard. On August the 29th, 1918, the East Kentucky Journal announced that classes for Prichard High School would begin on September the 9th, 1918. Classes would be held in the old Will Hoyt Law Office while the building was under construction. 90 years ago, on May 21st, 1919, the first graduating class of Prichard High School received their diplomas at the commencement service held at the old Methodist Episcopal Church South. And the first graduating class was Harriet Malone, Annabelle Giles, Ursula Blankenship, and John Morris Robinson. So on this May 23rd, 2009, we want to celebrate the 90th anniversary of the first Prichard High School graduation. And to help us celebrate, we want to share a few memories from our oldest Prichard High School graduate and 4 of our former Prichard High School teachers.
I'm Jack Strother. I was born in the city of Grayson in October the 8th, 1912. I've lived in Grayson most of my life. Well, looking at a picture of old Prichard High School, it looks like just the one I walked into as a freshman in 1929. I didn't know what I was getting into. My teachers were, I thought I just had excellent teachers. It wasn't their fault that I didn't learn any more than I did. They were dedicated teachers. Our principal was E.A. Skillman, and we called him Eddie Boy when he didn't hear it. He was Eddie Boy. He was really a martinet. He kept order, and he had a rule that there'd be no snowballing on his campus there at all. We had a big snow down there one day in the recess or between classes or something. Some of the boys were outside and somebody threw a snowball at me. And I, of course, just fired back at him, but unluckily, he was standing on the steps there leading into the building. And he ran the building, slammed the door, and I had thrown just as he pulled the door to, and my snowball hit the glass door. It didn't break the door, but it sure splattered. Well, I didn't think anything about it. I started to run and walk away, and heard the window raised in Skillman's office, and he says, "Jack," he says, "come in here a minute, will you?" And I walked out. Well, I don't know what you want to tell me, something new or something about the building, you know. And I opened the door to his office. He picked me up, and he set me down in the chair physically, and it just rattled my brain. I didn't think. And he explained very specifically the rules to me again about snowball. And I don't think I ever touched snow again down there in my 4 years. I hadn't played before, and I played around a couple of years at Saturdays and after practice down there. And finally I made what they called the traveling squad. We had 8 players on the traveling squad. Cutter Mitchell was a good forward. J.W. Rutherford was the center on the team. Dan Worry was one of the main focus on our team. And Bob Osington was a good forward on it. Fred Malone was an excellent player on it. John Beckwith, I believe, was on that team. And Joe Wolford was one of the centers on it. And Charles O. Hatchett was one of the entertainers around Grayson. He was one of the best musicians on the piano that I ever heard. But he could play anything, anytime, and at the drop of a hat, and he would entertain you. In 1928, the big team around here was Ashland Tomcats. I remember in the 28 and 29, my years, my senior year, really, my junior years of 28, for the basketball tournament, Ashland was the state champions. I remember Tom Phipps and Ellis Johnson and Darrell Darby, and I remember the boys real well. I knew them all well. We played them, and we played, I know Grayson's claim to fame was, we played the national champions, and we played them the closest score that they were held in their home gym. They beat us 28-18, and that was a big score back then. But we were very proud of that. We held them 10 points. But we had a lot of fun with it. I remember my coach, Virgil Leon Sturgill. As I said, he was English, very high in English literature. I remember when we played Ashland over there, at the half, the boys were all just psyched up to the top as could be. And we went in at the half, you know, to get to rest in a minute. And he sat us down and he started reading from literature some poem. I've forgotten whether it was out of Virgil or something that of course, I'm sure it was a good poem, but he said a poem on life. And we sat there and listened to that during our rest period. It's a wonder he ever got the boys back out on the floor to play ball. Pritchett didn't have a football team when I started in down there, started the school. We had a coach down there, and he decided to have one for our team. Of course, we decided that he called for volunteers for the football team. Any boys that would volunteer to come out and play football. Well, they wound up buying, I think they bought 18 uniforms. I was about 5'8", I guess, and weighed about 110 pounds, or maybe 115. Had no more business trying to play football than anything, but I was a little bit tough at that time, so it doesn't bother me to go out and try it. To name some of them, there was Jap Huff. Bob Osington was the quarterback of the team. Dan Morey was one of the halfbacks. Fred Malone was a halfback. And Jimmy Rupert was a backfield man. Jim Rupert, of course, was one of the leading merchants in town for years until he retired. Jim's still living, incidentally. He's just a little bit younger than I am. I think his birthday's in December and mine's in October. I think that's all the difference there is. And he's the only one of them that I know that is still living. W. Relford was one of the linemen. And Ty Holcomb. Ty and I tried out for ends. I tried to play end on it. Wasn't as successful as our basketball team, but of course, I think we won a game or two, and not more than two, I wouldn't think. You've got a school that you should be proud of. It has been a leading part of has produced Grayson's leading citizens or leading people that have done most around Grayson. And I think that you should be proud of it, and you should, the fact that you're attending this meeting, show you have an interest, and you should continue that interest and do what you can to continue the legacy of Prichard High School.
Well, I'm Lorraine Criswell, and I was born January the 7th, 1914, at E.K. Junction, which is between Grayson and Hitchens on the E.K. Railroad. I guess we were all teachers, my sister Irene, Christine, and me, and one brother. We were all teachers. We taught a total of 109 years, so in Carter County, yeah. Starting out as a freshman, goodness me, we'd never been hardly out of Carter County, let alone trying to get to Grayson. And the only way we had at that time to get to Grayson was to ride the Blue Goose. A lot of you have never heard of the Blue Goose, but anyhow, we lived at Leon, which was on the C&O Railroad, but we had to walk about a mile on the C&O to get to the Blue Goose, which was running on the EK Road. So we rode the Blue Goose for 4 years to get to Prichard to school. Now, when we went to Prichard, the building was very small at that time, but we thought it was a large building because we'd never seen anything like that at Leon or where we'd gone to school at Wolf Creek. The whole time we were at Prichard, Mr. Skillman was our principal. Well, really, the one teacher that I can really remember that I felt like I guess I was closer to than some of the others was Miss McIntyre, our French teacher, because I took the French for 2 years, and even after I graduated from high school, we corresponded for quite a while, and she really encouraged me to go ahead, to go on to college. So I do remember Jack Strother. Now let's see, Jack was a senior when I was a sophomore, so I do remember the name Jack Strother. Of course, I remember seeing him and everything. And Jimmy Rupert was another one. Now, he was in my sister's class. He graduated in 30. Now, Hazel Calhoun, I never did even remember seeing her because she graduated 2 years after I did. But to this day, I don't remember how in the world we got together, but when we started to Berea to school, we roomed together that year. So I really don't remember too much about her. My husband was working in Louisville at the powder plant, and so when he was there, Mr. Calhoun came and asked me if I would go to Prichard and start the home economics program. That was in 1945. So I said yes. He said, now there's nothing that you want that we can't buy. We'll buy whatever it takes for you to get this home economics program started. Well, we had a room in the basement, one room in the basement. We had 6 tables, 24 chairs, 3 kerosene stoves. Now, not electric stoves, but kerosene stoves. I never even used a kerosene stove, but I soon learned how and everything. And they also had an automatic washer. And at that time, nobody knew anything about an automatic washer. And Mr. Dyer would be there once a week just about to get us straightened out. In 1946, I started the program in 45, but in 1946, we organized the FHA, which was the Future Homemakers of America. Now, any girl that was enrolled in home ec was eligible to belong to the FHA. So we had a good FHA club. In the 1960s, they built a new home ec program, building. Home ec and science was just directly behind Prichard High School. And then we had all kinds of room, all kinds of supplies, and the children, I think, really enjoyed it as much as I did. Well, now, in 1970, we knew that we were going to be moving to the East Car out to the high school and leaving Prichard. So in 1971, that was the last class that we had at Prichard, which we had 101 seniors to graduate that year. So we did do quite a bit of, I guess, thinking, well, is this going to work or is it not going to work when we combine the 2 schools together? But anyhow, with Hitchens coming and with us going out there, I think we made a real good transition. Well, now, I retired from East Carter in 1975 after 32 and a half years of teaching. So, but I can look back and think of the really good times that I really felt like that I had because if I hadn't actually enjoyed doing what I was doing, I don't think I would have done a good job. But I hope that the children did feel like that they got something from the home ec program, because we didn't really try to involve each child in whatever it was we were trying to do. We did not leave any of them out. Everyone was treated equal, and we did what we think the best that we could for the children while we were there.
My name is Hazel Horton Calhoun, and I was born on the banks of Sandy River, down next to the bridge, in what's now the farm is the Horton Estates. I grew up in a large family of 11 children. I was third. Wick and Wayne were my older brothers. And then there was my younger brother Ralph that died when he was 11. Ralph, Glenn, me, Homer, Frank, Reba June, and Don. Well, I thought it was a wonderful building because I was used to the old graded school building, and I liked the Prichard High School building, and I got to be the principal's helper. Mr. Skillman was my high school principal first, and he told me that he would expect me to answer the telephone. He said, "Do you know how to answer the telephone?" And I assured him that I did, but still he picked up the telephone receiver, it was on the wall, and put it to his ear and said, "Hello." Well, that was exactly what I told him I could do. I sat behind Guy Fultz in I guess it was my senior year, and I tormented him by pulling on his galluses, and he let me get by with it. He didn't yell at me or he didn't report me, but it was fun to torment him. I didn't need inspiration to become a teacher. I knew what I wanted to do, and I did it. But I admired them all. Miss Carol, Josephine, was a very nice teacher. She later married the coach, Edwin Charles, who was also one of our teachers. Claire Robinson was one of my high school teachers. She'd also been a grade teacher at the old grade school building. And I remember that she stopped me and told me some students that I'd better watch out for, that they were troublemakers. And I asked her to let me find out. And she took it that way, and I never found any problem that I can recall with any student. I met him at teachers' meetings, and I took one look at him, and I liked him. In fact, I liked everything about him, and it wasn't long before we were dating. And dating went into being at Moorhead together and teaching and teachers' meetings and things like that until 1941 when we were married, on August 16th. I was teaching at Reedville when we decided to get married. And I remember Doc Gearhart came up to finish the day for me at Reedville, and Max and I went down to Grayson to get married. And we went to Arthur Jarvis, because I thought he was a minister. I think he had been, but he said that he didn't do that anymore. So we went to the Baptist church, and Reverend Outland performed the ceremony. And we took our honeymoon at Paramount Theater in Ashland. And the next day, I think he got on the bus and went back to Moorhead School. And I went back to Reedville to teach. And it seems we didn't have any disorderly problems at Prichard. I think it may have been because Max's reputation was a stern principal, although he just kept order. And the Prichard students knew that they'd better watch out, and they did. So I don't remember any big disturbances there. Only one. You remember John Phillips, who later became a teacher at Prichard. He was in Peggy Morrison's class, and he always had a smile on his face. But if you know, that was typical of Johnny, to smile. And Miss Peggy thought he was laughing at her. And she came up to the principal's office and reported him. And she sent him up. And Max asked him to explain the situation. And he didn't have anything to explain except that she wanted him to get that smile off his face, and he couldn't. So Max let him go home and stay until afternoon, and then he'd come back and go to the next class. And his mother called and wanted to know what he came home for. She figured he'd been kicked out. But Max explained it to her, and she accepted it. As far as I know, I started the trips to Washington, D.C., and it was no problem. I just went over to the train depot and discussed it with somebody there, and he told me how much it would be for each student. Sometimes we made some money for students to take advantage of, and the rest of it they paid out of their own pocket. So we went to Washington, and we were met by a guide who put us on a bus and took us all around to the interesting places to see. And we saw just about everything in Washington that we were allowed to see at that time. It was for entertainment and to make money, and it was always a comedy. And I would pick out the cast, and I remembered I needed a small fellow for the senior play, and all my boys in the senior class were large, and I had to get a boy out of the senior class, out of the junior class. So Jim Phillips fit the picture, and I asked Jim if he'd take a part, and he did. So that year, we invited Jim to go to Washington with us, and he got to go the next year too, so he got 2 years out of it.
Well, I'm Peggy Morrison, and I was born in Pulaski County. Well, I started teaching at Prichard in 51, and I taught 4th grade because they didn't have an opening in the high school. And then the next year, Mary Stringer came back, and after that, I was in the secondary field there, teaching mostly social studies. I think sometimes I taught a few other things, but mostly it was just with the government and history, and I liked it. And I taught there until I left, and that was in 60. Okay, when I started teaching at Prichard, the teaching environment was easy because the discipline was so good. And the principal The superintendent backed you all the way if you had a problem. We didn't have many problems. The kids were eager to learn, and the parents wanted them to learn, and they were well disciplined at home. And we had the kids from the country brought in by bus, and then we had the children in town that going to Prichard, and that was the first time I taught where they had mixed together like that, and I liked it. And the children got along real well together. But teaching wasn't hard because the discipline was so good. And we all were in our fields in teaching, so we knew what we were supposed to do. I found it easy to teach there. I don't like to teach where the discipline is poor. The programs they had outside of just the classroom, music was so important. They had the best music program from the beginning all the way through high school. And I don't see how Mrs. Haight did all of that, but she did. She had a wonderful program. And the students loved the musicals and all the activities connected with it. Well, I had some special friends in the teaching, and the Bramwells didn't have children, so they just took Hugh and me under their wing, and I think thought of us as theirs. And we had the closest friendship of any, and she taught me so much. She taught me to sew, and we would get together and go to Ashland to these teachers' meetings too, and buy material, and we'd stay with her sister and go to parties when they had the regional teachers meetings there. It was wonderful. Marie and Jack would come over and meet us, and we would always go to the hotel lobby, and there was Carl Perkins. He was playing the field for politically, and he supported the teachers. All loved him. And then, of course, Hazel Calhoun, she always was so full of getting things together, and we'd have dances, and she'd promote the dances, and we liked to folk dance, and she'd in the gym, and when we'd have our Christmas parties, or he even had a cabin out at Carter Caves. And he would invite Adrian Dorn and Mignon up from Moorhead, and we'd all get together and party out there. And I can just remember the dances and how much fun. And Hazel was always fun. She always liked to party, and she would lead us and promote us in that. So she was special. But the biggest discipline problem might be the kids coming in late for lunch. They could go home for lunch in town, and they'd be late coming. There's 2 bells, and one would be to get in the building and head to your locker and get ready. Second bell, you're supposed to be in your room. Teachers stand out in the hall to see that they were in the room. Well, I was up on top floor then, and Mr. Calhoun said, "Now, Peggy, you stand outside that boys' restroom, and don't you let those boys go in there on that second bell, because if they do, they're going to be late." And said the teacher takes the roll, and said they know. And so Henry Wilhoit was late sometimes, and this one day he came rushing in. Of course, they'd been home, I guess. And I said, "Henry, you just can't go in there today. You'll have to get permission later, because I must keep you out and everybody else after that second bell." And he looked at me, and he didn't say anything ugly. He just said, put his hands on his hips, and he said, "I'm going to remember this as long as I live." I've often said if I were doing my life again, living it again, I'd be a teacher. Because I love to teach, I love the students, and I like the association with the teachers. And if at Prichard, if I had to summarize my work there, it would be very good. Wonderful building to teach in, clean, orderly, disciplined, and we had our little ups and downs, but nothing serious. And I always felt like that somebody had my back if I had trouble. I never felt like that the board, the superintendent, or the principal, or anybody was not there to support me. And I would do it again.